All right, welcome back everyone to JFace Games. Today we are talking about the RPG. For those of you who are new to this channel, I've been trying to create an RPG for probably about a year now, and a lot of the time I spend exploring other games and exploring other mechanics and thinking about how I like those and how I would like to adapt those or straight take those and add them into a new game. So today, I've been talking about getting the newest rules iteration sort of into a video, and I think that these rules are going to be very different than what you've seen in the past. I've been playing a lot of games lately. That's the hiatus. I've been playing in a Band of Blades campaign, which has been a lot of fun. I recently picked up Easy D6, Hardsuit, Deathbringer. I've read through a couple other RPGs, so I've just been exploring a lot of stuff. And that's good. I needed the break because I was kind of in the weeds a little bit on the game. So let's talk about the first thing, which is setting. Previously, I was making a setting agnostic game, and after talking to some people in the comments, I felt that it would be important to kind of have at least a base setting that I'm building towards for this first go run of rules. And so I ended up with one that I thought about for a card game a while back, which is sort of this, think about a world that's like a world that is all water except for floating islands that float about, right? So that's the setting. You have this world with these floating islands or floating continents, and then you have the most part, the actual ground or surface level of the world is water. Think steampunkish a little bit, and think about ships, right? You think about ships that can take flight, but they can also sail on the ocean, right? Or this surface of the world. So that's basically the high altitude view of what it would look like. Now, I've really enjoyed Band of Blades, which is a Forged in the Dark system game, mainly because I think that they did a wonderful job of executing the campaign phase versus sort of the actual like narrative phase. So much so that I love the campaign phase that really drove me wanting to go into this setting specifically, because I liked the idea of a crew, right? Like of a actual ship's crew, where you have the different roles of the captain. I wrote a couple in here: captain, first mate, quartermaster, supplies corp, and emissary. I've been trying to think of what are those roles in terms of what would they do mechanically. They'd probably be very similar to Band of Blades. I think that one of the things that Band of Blades does wonderfully is that it offloads some of the responsibility of the DM for the downtime activities, and it puts it onto the players. You know, the players decide, okay, we're going to go this way. This is the type of mission we want. We're going to try to manage these resources. One person actually tracks the XP and figures out who's going on the mission, etc. It's almost like West Marches, slightly, in terms of the players have a little bit more onus of the downtime and the responsibility of where the campaign's kind of going, and then the actual action starts. So I really like that. This is just sort of, I'm just taking some of those rules and taking some concepts. I probably would want a lot more mission types than are currently in Band of Blades, because Band of Blades definitely fits a specific narrative. You are an army on the run. This is going to be a lot more, there's going to be a lot more going on. All right, so now, the big meat and potatoes, which is the combat, right? How do you actually play this game nuts and bolts wise? And that's probably changed a bit. And there's a ton of notes here, so I'm going to try to just explain my thoughts. So tell you what, I'll come down to the bottom here and we'll just start typing stuff out. It'll be easier. So, in essence, we've talked about in the past that I like the idea of those 4 different sort of, or 5 different attributes. Are we to 6 now? I think we're at 6 attributes that sort of make up your character, right? Where you have an attribute for defender, controller, leadership, striker, marksman, to kind of break up striker being melee, ranged, and distance. And then we talked about mystic, some sort of magical aspect, right? So those are your attributes. Now, that's going to be represented by some sort of die, probably a D6 initially, and then you're going to bring it up to a D8, right, at some point in time. And then eventually a D10. It's really super. Now, those are your attributes. You also have a tier, so that we'll say these are your attributes. And we talked about this is controller, defender, striker, marksman, leader, and then some sort of mystic. Then you have your tier die, right? And in essence, like, this is the tier of play you're at, right? It's a D6, a D8, a D10, maybe even a D4. We'll put D4 up here. We're not 100% sure yet, right? So you have a tier die, which is like your what level of which you're playing. So if you remember, like 4th E, I think it was 4th E, there was like heroic, paragon, and epic tiers, and that was pretty much like a different level range, right? 1st to 10, 11 to 20, 21 to 30, right? So you have your tier die. Now these are the 2 die you have that are relevant to your character, okay? So mainly combat-wise is that you're going to be on your turn, going to be deciding what you want to do, right? And it's going to be all the players go, then all the monsters go. So it's going to be, you get to kind of decide as a group who's going first, etc. But it's heroes, monsters, heroes. Now if there's a surprise round, maybe the monsters get to go first one time, and then heroes, monsters, heroes, whatever the case is. And we are going, once again, zone-based combat. Now, I've had videos in the past about the zones. Hopefully you've been watching and keeping up, and so you understand the zones in terms of if you're on the same card, like an index card, then you're in the same zone. You're sort of close to each other or nearby. If you're on the edge of it, you're close to each other if you're on the card. You're nearby if you're on the edge of it. If you're on another card that's a little ways away, you're far away, right? So there's different ranges. So in essence, you're going to be on your turn deciding what sort of action you want to do and then how you want to defend, right? So you have this action and defense, okay? Now the action also within that is going to be movement, right? But in essence, we're just talking right now, you have one action and a move, potentially, and then you have a defense. And you're going to have to assign attribute dice or tier dice to one of these things before you get to start your turn. So you say, my dog's moving. You say, okay, I'm going to do a striker action this turn. My striker die is a D8. We're currently, we'll say first tier, but maybe we'll say second tier. So I have a D8 and a D6. I'm going to make my defense this round my D6, and I'm going to make my action this round my D8 because that's the striker die. Now say I wanted to do a leadership roll that turn and say my leadership's a D6. Well, maybe I just have 2 D6, so that's not much of a choice I'm making there. And they're both going to be D6s, okay? Then I take my turn, and then what the other die, it means is that that's what I'm actually going to defend against the monster against, okay? So you're making a choice in terms of action die, right? Now, what happens when you're actually rolling your die? What does that mean? Well, I really loved the idea of position in the Forged in the Dark system. Position in the Forged in the Dark system is the idea that narratively you are potentially in a controlled, risky, or desperate situation. And that was supposed to denote, like, how much harm are you potentially going to have on yourself by performing this action and failing, right? And I really like that, mainly because narratively it wraps up all the concepts of, like, there's a ton of monsters around, or the enemy has high ground, or I'm being flanked, or I can't see. All of those sort of narrative concepts get wrapped up into what do we think the position is that you're currently in. And then they also do what is the effect that you have on the situation, meaning that you could be controlled, but you've got a limited effect because you're, fighting a, kaiju or something, right? Anyways, we don't have to worry about that. So position. So I wanted to kind of get this same concept of position, right? So to me, that started making me think about, well, what if the monster has a die, right? So now imagine that you're playing and you've got little people on an index card, and then the DM has these different dice in front of him. He's got a couple, like red D4, red D6, red D8, red D10, red D12, right? And what he's going to do is he's going to assign what is the current position of, and he's got 2 choices. She has 2 choices. Either A, they assign what's the position of the encounter itself. So in other words, like the encounter DC. Think about ICRPG, how he would have a general DC for the entire zone or index card you're on, right? Or the DM can say, this particular monster has a particular challenge to them position, right? And what I think is important is that you can change the position. So let's just say we'll start basic. We'll just say that being on this card is a risky situation. So the DM puts a red d6 on that card, or a red d8 on that card, right? What this means now is that if I'm trying to attack someone, or if I'm trying to do any sort of action on that card, I am rolling my action die and the position die, and I'm trying to get my die higher than the position die. So I pick up both die as the player and I roll them, right? So I've got this green die that's my die or whatever, and say I'm trying to strike this monster and I'm using a d6, but we'll say the position is sort of tricky and it's a difficult situation, so they've got a d8 and I roll this d6, d8, hopefully I get higher, right? Now, say that the DM says that, now all of a sudden you have two buddies that come onto the zone. So now the situation is you've got three people and there's only one monster there, right? Now all of a sudden you might change that position die on there, like the DC die changes, right? So that it can be dynamic, right? So that's the basic concept, right? Now, there are ways to change that, and that is teamwork pool, or teamwork points. Your teamwork points are, in essence, anytime you miss an attack or action, you get +1 to the teamwork pool. Anytime, there's some other potential areas, but in essence, you end up having this pool of points. At any point in time, a player can take that pool and they can add any of those points to a roll they've had. So they can use those points to, say they had that D6 striker die and the monster had a D8 and you rolled it and you got a 3 and the monster got a 6. Well, you could say, okay, I'm going to add 3 teamwork points to my die to make it so that I actually hit, right? You could use that to add to your defensing die, because your defense is going to be the same sort of mechanic. You're going to be rolling your defense against whatever the position dice is, right? So you're going to have to be dealing with that as well. Now, the only difference with defense is that there's going to be a rule where you can always substitute your defender die for this defense as long as you didn't use the defender die for an action, right? Now that could be, we'll see how it plays out. I think that makes it more thematic to ramp up your defender die, because you can always use it if necessary. Because if you're ramping up that, the other dice aren't going to be as powerful. Okay, so that's the teamwork points. You add those in. Now, where the fun comes is that you can have all sorts of other ways of modifying this core mechanic, right? You could have a monster, one of their stats being that when this monster attacks, they always get +1. So regardless of the position, when you're rolling that die, whether that monster die is a D6, D8, D10, all of a sudden it's getting a +1 or a +2 or a +3, So you can have those things. Or the monster gets advantage on any attack in water, because it's a, fish, aquatic creature, and you're in, water. So now you've got to get 2d8 and roll those 2d8, and you've got to take the higher, right? And players can get advantage, etc. Now, what I did like is the idea that I still like the concept of, and if you saw this in previous games, that we had a target number and a bloodied number and a death number, right? Because we wanted to have this concept of, okay, if I can get to a certain threshold on a roll, I should be able to potentially outright just kill the monster, right? Insta-kill it. And so I'm still trying to work this in, because the target number is gone now, technically, because it's a target dice. It's a position dice that's changing, right? So we don't technically have that. It's a contested roll. The bloodied number I got rid of after doing my play test, and it was just too much of a hassle to do the math on it and figure it out. It was slowing things down. The death number I still like. My first thought is that auto-death, or death strike, would be that if you are doing a contested roll against a monster, and that monster's position die rolls a 1, and you succeed with your die, insta-get, right? So that's one thought, is that monster rolls a 1 on their dice, you instantly kill them, as long as you successfully hit. So that's cool, because technically, if you're able to push your position so that the monster is rolling a d4 thematically, then there's more of a chance you're outright killing them, right? And then some monsters, they're just not much of a threat, So because technically in the game of Band of Blades, the way they determine position is scale, threat level, and potency, right? Which is the idea of, are there more of us or more of them? How badass is this monster versus how badass am I? And then are there magical weapons or magical entities or things at play, right? So that's our basic mechanic. Now there is one other mechanic that I thought was really cool from Easy D6. I don't know how this is fitting in yet, but I really like that Easy D6, you could in essence get a dice pool. And in that game you roll a D6 and you can get advantage and you can get disadvantage, but you can get like further advantage. You can get extra dice. And so now you've got like double advantage, triple advantage, and you're rolling more D6. But anytime you roll a 1 on a dice, it's an auto fail. So by having more dice, you then have more of a chance of auto failing, right? But you have more of a chance of succeeding. Now I like that. And you think at first like, oh, that sounds brutal. But what's great about it is that you leverage teamwork points, because technically you can add a teamwork point to a secondary dice. So say I roll 3d8 because I have an 8d8 and I get a 6, 1 and a 1. Let's say I rolled 2 1s. This would be an auto fail, but I could take 2 teamwork points and now increase this to a 2 and this to a 2. And so I still get a success, but I burn 2 of the teamwork points. And those teamwork points are amazing, right? They can be very potent and powerful. And there'll be other ways to get those. Like someone's going to be having a leadership ability that they can, take stress and put into the pool, etc. The other thing that I'm thinking is having a health pool that's only 5, right? That's your stress, and that's it, right? And something along those lines, or maybe it's 10 or something like that. And that's it. You just have 5 stress or 10 health or something like that, and that becomes the thing that also gets put into the teamwork pool potentially, if not by just misses themselves. So there will be ways that you can take stress and add to teamwork. So that'll be an option of some sort. Let me think if there was any other things. Oh, there was one really cool guy who did, I forget his name now, I apologize. But he did Deathbringer. It's a little trifold for 5e of a way of making that game more potent. And he talked about having, he refers to them as hero dice. In essence, it's a way of getting, instead of like inspiration, you get extra d6s. And so you can roll those d6s for damage, you can roll those d6s to help you with hits, etc. And his concept behind it that I totally agree with is that why does the rogue get all the fun, right? Meaning like, why does only the rogue get this spike damage? And anyone should have the opportunity to all of a sudden smite like a paladin or do something amazing. So there's probably going to be some mechanic, whether maybe it's your teamwork points, that you can add teamwork points to the damage. It would be like normal where single hand or one-arm weapons or one-handed weapons do 1 point of damage, two-handed weapons do 2 points of damage, but you can add as much teamwork points to that damage as possible, right? Like you can use your teamwork pool to all of a sudden spike it up. So it'll probably be something like that also. But this is it. This is the new sort of mechanical concept. Let me peek around in here just to see if there was anything else that I didn't mention. Terrain. So we talked about potency, but I think that terrain, because this is still going to be a grid-based game, that's going to be a part of the equation of thought process behind position. We already talked about that. Let me see if there's anything else in here real quick. Once you know your action, roll them simultaneously. Did you got that? Monster rolls 1, you automatically kill them at damage based on your weapon. Increase roll number. You only have 5 strength player. Oh, if you roll the same number as the monster's number, then you can take additional stress to do additional damage to the monster, but you also, by taking that stress, you're getting hurt. So to me, that was this concept of you're both, if you rolled the same number, you're kind of hitting each other. It's an option. It's an option for the player to do more damage to the monster, but also be taking more damage in the concept. So I thought that was kind of cool. I already talked about you can add pluses to the monster's rolls, like it's just a base thing that the monster has. We already talked about the defender die, being able to substitute for the action. A monster attacks you, use your choice. I think that's it. So let me go. Let me hear what you guys think about this. Where this new sort of mechanic. I I'm getting excited about it because I think that it streamlines a lot of stuff. This is not the social mechanic, and this is also not the magic mechanic. I'm getting definitely inspired by both ICRPG and EasyD6 for thinking about a different mechanic for magic and making magic more volatile in essence. EasyD6 in particular, I'll do a video on that in general, but they have a great system about being able to, you take more stress to be able to get these things to happen, and it's much more of a narrative sort of spell casting in general. So anyways, let me know what you think. It's good talking to you guys again. Leave the comments below, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and hopefully we'll get some more videos out super soon.